What's up, guys? Ryan Schultz here from E39 Source in San Diego, California. Today we've got a 2003 BMW E39 M5, and we'll be doing a radiator replacement DIY. The radiator in the M5 is specific to the M5. It is thicker and provides a better cooling capacity for the larger engine. Generally, these fail right here on the driver's side plastic side tank. There's a little logo or text. It says Bear. Bear is the original equipment supplier for this radiator, and right there seems to be the weak point. Sometimes you can even come in here and see where coolant has been leaking and running down the side. If you push it, you'll hear a little bit of hissing. In this case, we're replacing it preventatively, and this radiator is original to the car at 2003 with 96,000 miles, and it's gotten kind of clogged up with debris. A lot of the cooling fins are full of just dirt and gravel and rocks and road debris, and it's affecting the efficiency of the cooling system. Let's briefly go over some of the tools we'll need for this job. We'll need to remove the fan and fan clutch. It's an 1.25 inch or something like a 32 or 36 millimeter wrench, and then a tool to counterhold the pulley on the water pump. We'll need an assortment of flathead screwdrivers, picks, pry tools, pliers, and then something for the Oetiker clamps up on the expansion tank under the hood. So you can use a nice tool like this, which cinches down the Oetiker clamps. You can also get away with something like this from Harbor Freight at a fraction of the cost. To cut them off, you can use wire cutters. You can stick a pick in there and twist it until it gets loose. Or this tool has been fantastic for cutting off old Oetiker clamps. To get started, we'll need to drain the coolant out of the radiator, which will require access underneath the car. If you've got a lift, that's very simple. If not, very carefully and safely lift the car. You don't need more than about 2 feet if you're willing to crawl under there and just pull the drain plug. Before we get to that, of course, we'll need to remove the underbelly pans, which are actually already off this car for additional service. And these are not them, these are off another customer car. But you start in the rear with the transmission shield, and it's held on by a series of quarter-turn Phillips head fasteners around the perimeter. Note that there are 2 more in the center bore around the center front jacking point. You release that panel, followed by the primary engine panel, which again is held on with a series of quarter-turn Phillips screws. Before we take the drain plug off the radiator, we can hasten that process by removing the expansion tank cap in the engine bay. We lost the audio clip here somehow, but you'll need to get a bucket or a tray or something to catch the fluid out of here, which is about 1 gallon. On the driver's side of the radiator, we'll see the blue cap right there. That needs to be turned counterclockwise 90 degrees with some pliers or some tool you can grip that with, and then it'll need to be pried down and out. This would be a good time to do a complete coolant flush in the car by draining out the engine block as well. And on each cylinder bank, you'll be able to look up here in between the motor mount and the oil pan. We're on the passenger side right now. If we get a look in there, there's a 13 millimeter bolt head with a yellow stripe on it. That is the block drain for cylinder bank number 1. You can drive that with a 13 millimeter socket, a U-joint, various extensions. Torque spec on that bolt is 18.5 foot-pounds or 25 Newton meters. There is a crush washer in there that will need to be replaced. I'll put the part number down below. For the driver's side cylinder bank 2, we're looking in between the steering pitman arm and the engine itself. Right up there, it's the same bolt. Lowered the car back down while retaining my bucket to catch coolant still coming out of the radiator. Do yourself a favor and put down another pan or tray here underneath the engine, underneath the fan. We're going to be removing the hoses from the radiator as well as the expansion tank, which will make quite a mess. Up next is removing the fan blades. Remember that these are reverse threaded, so righty loosey, lefty tighten. We'll be counter holding 2 of those 3 visible, but total of 4 bolts on the water pump pulley and cracking the fan free and then spinning it off. The fan just snakes out the top without removing anything, or you may be able to snake it out the bottom as well. It's a great time to check the production date on both your fan blades and fan clutch. I recommend these to be replaced every 10 years or 100,000 miles. With the fan out of the way, we're ready to remove the expansion tank. The expansion tank is held in with 2 plastic fasteners up here. You pry the center out with a pry tool and then the bottom follows. Before we do that, we'll be removing these 2 Oetiker clamps right here from the expansion tank, and these little black caps just peel off like this to fully expose the clamps. We've got both clamps off. The hoses just twist and pull off like that. We've got both the little plastic pop rivets off as well. Now we'll look down in between the expansion tank and the bank 1 intake tube here. We'll just see a hose clamp holding a hose on the bottom of the tank. You can drive that with a long flathead screwdriver or a 6 millimeter socket on a ratchet. When you remove that hose, be prepared to catch about another gallon of coolant right below. That's why we put the pans down there. And then you can pull the tank up. It kind of hinges out towards the engine and pulls straight up. We'll find the level sensor connector at the bottom. It's got a tab on the bottom that you'll press in, and I'll need 2 hands, but the connector just pulls right off. Up next is the fan shroud. We've just got 3 connections holding that in. That's this piece right here. On each side, in the corners, we've got more plastic push rivets that we can pry out and remove. One on the driver's side is here right above the upper radiator hose. And then down underneath the expansion tank, we'll see our AUC sensor, or air quality control sensor. The electrical connector for that is on the left or outboard passenger side. You can press the tab on the side and wiggle the connector off of the sensor. You'll notice 2 plastic tabs on the bottom of the fan shroud. They go into little plastic tabs on the radiator to hold the bottom in. Otherwise, it just kind of pushes towards the engine and pulls straight out with little fuss. Now, for the radiator itself, if you're not replacing this hose here, you'll want to keep that. That's simply held on with a Phillips head or 6mm hose clamp here, so we'll release that. Radiator's held into the car with these tabs over here, these plastic arms. So 8mm screw here and another one on the passenger side. Then, of course, we have our hoses. There's a total of 2. We're going to use a pick tool to put in there and pull up about 1/2 inch. That will release the hose, and then it's a matter of rocking it and pulling it back and forth until it comes off. On the passenger side, it's lower, but it's the same deal with the hook right here. I would do those hoses before you release these brackets. Otherwise, the radiator will get real floppy. To avoid a struggle with these hoses, we can use leverage. Got a small piece of wood here with the radiator. Since we're replacing it, it doesn't even matter if it were to get damaged, but it changes my angle a bit. And then a simple pry bar here from Harbor Freight, and then we just pull. Trick works at the bottom too. When you've done a few of these radiators, they come out without any hassle, but the first time or two is a bit of a hassle. Here's the old one. You can see why we're replacing it. It is just chocked full of, well, bees. That is a lot of bees. I find it best to lift the passenger side and get the radiator at an angle about like this, call it 30 degrees. And that'll do 2 things. One, it helps make it easier to get out. Thing number 2 is it'll drain the radiator out of the bottom down into your bucket to make it lighter and cleaner to take out. Alternatively, you can put the plug back in, take it out with say another 1/2 gallon of coolant in it. This is the passenger side of the side saddle tank and where that lower hose goes in. And it's got a little rubber foot on there. It's keyed and only goes one way. We'll need to move these over to the new radiator. There's one on the driver's side as well. And the new radiators do not come with these, so we'll take this off. But what you'll do, this part sticks out, call it 1.5 inches, and you need to get that up and above your AC hose here. It'll move a little bit, though don't force it too aggressively. Once that's over here, then you won't have any problem clearing the steering lines here. You'll be able to pull the whole thing straight up and out at that 30-degree or so angle. Now is a marvelous opportunity to spend a bit of time in here, get a vacuum and suck out the rest of the dead bees, leaves, dirt, and debris from our power steering cooler and our AC condenser as well. It's a good time to get to the frame rails if you want to do some cleanup. Excellent time to do belts, pulleys, any of those things. You've got loads of room here in between the engine and core support. Those little rubber feet that I showed you fit in these cutouts. There's one here on the driver's side under the power steering hoses, and on the passenger side, wide open right here. Here's our new radiator. I've gotten these little feet cleaned up. They only go on one way, and it just presses on like that. You can also note that the new radiator comes with the small feet in the bottom for the fan shroud, in addition to a new drain plug. The new radiator drops in just like the old one came out at our 30-degree angle. You make sure that A, your feet don't fall off. You want those rubber feet to fall right down there into the same perch that they were in before on both sides. Then you can take your coolant hoses. Make sure you press those onto the radiator really, really well. You do not want to not have that latch all the way and have one come off. That's never fun. So press them in all the way and then push those little clips back down until they snap. Went ahead and put our hose back on here, cleaned up the hardware. You can see that the hose clamp was right in between those white lines, and we want it about at the same angle with the head facing the engine as the mass airflow meter. I'm noticing now that the new radiator did not come with these small rubber grommets that fit in here to facilitate the little arm bracket that holds these on, so we'll just rob those off the old one. The fan shroud goes back at a bit of an angle too. So we talked about the tabs on the bottom that need to go into the radiator. The whole fan shroud sits right up against the radiator, pretty much completely flush. So of course we want these attachment points here where the rivets to go to be flush. Then there's 2 little arms that stick off of the shroud that go into small tabs. We can kind of just see the one. It's about impossible to get on camera right down there by the power steering hose. So it seats in there. There's another tab down at the bottom corner on both sides. And then you just secure it with those push rivets and then our brackets and our 8mm fasteners up front. As that goes on, we want to be sure to put our hose through the hole, and before putting them on the expansion tank, of course, we're going to put our new Oetiker clamps, line those up where they were before, cinch them down with whatever tool of choice, and don't forget to replace your black plastic beauty caps. Mechanical fan spins back in place. Again, that is reverse threaded, and then I like to just snug those up with the wrench and counterhold tool so it doesn't spin off when you turn the engine off. Check all your hoses, all your connections. Don't forget the electrical connector for our coolant level sensor in the bottom of the expansion tank. Then go ahead and fill your system. I've got it just about full. It's still drinking things down. I'm going to start it up in a minute, let it run for a bit. The E39 M5 is thankfully self-venting, so we don't have any bleeder screws or anything like that to vent the system. Let it run, throw a few revs at it. After you drive the car for a day or two, check it again, and you'll probably have to top it up with another cup or so. And we're tucked in for the night. That completes the E39 M5 radiator replacement. Please check the description below this video to find the part numbers and a link to purchase those parts required for the job. Thanks so much for watching this E39 Source video. We'll talk in the next one. Take care.